Hello, my name is Darcy, and I'm going to be going over how I care for my tarantula Rosie. I'll start off by kind of identifying her species, where she's from, and all that. Then going over the care, such as cage setup, tools you can use, about feeding, about the process of molting, and a little on handling. First of all, she is what the pet stores like to call them, a Chilean rose hair or Chilean rose, and but her scientific name is Grammostola rosea or G. rosea. She comes from Chile, South America. And traits are, they usually come in a brownish tinge, but they get the name rose hair because of the carapace. It's usually a pinkish rose color. And anyways, they get about maybe 4 or 5 inches, give or take, when they're fully grown. As far as temperament, they're generally docile, but some of them can be moodier than others. Also, a tarantula can have different moods on different days, especially with this species. Rosie's generally pretty docile, but she can have her off days. And as far as availability, you can find them in pretty much any pet store like Petco. Maybe, well, there's some that don't carry such exotics, but they're generally found at Petco for about maybe $20, $25. When I first got my first tarantula, it was probably actually about $12 on its own anyway. As far as the cage setup, all they need is either an aquarium, not very big, they don't need much space. You can get them those critter keepers that you see, like, you get like reptiles or other small little animals. As far as substrate, you can use inorganic potting soil, or basically without any fertilizer. You can use, I have in my tarantula's cage, it's basically a reptile substrate called jungle bed. Let's see, it's got coconut bark, calci sand, and vermiculite. You can find those at pet stores. As far as decor, tarantulas don't need very much. I mean, not my Chilean rose hair, anyway. Really all she needs is a hide, and really I made that out of, made those out of old cottage cheese or butter containers and just cut them in half. I mean, it's cheaper than the logs I have at the pet stores, and really, she likes them about as much. Temperature and humidity, she doesn't really need anything special as long as she's not kept too cold. I mean, probably like regular room temperature is fine for her, and just kind of like keep a water dish in there full and maybe even overflowing to keep the humidity a little up. As far as care tools, there's the water dish. There's just a small little dish like that, and just keep it overflowing every once in a while. I don't have forceps, but some people use them like with feeding and stuff. I generally just use a paintbrush as pretty much just to check her temperament. I use a paintbrush because if she goes to bite it, she's just gonna bite the bristles and ain't gonna hurt her very much. Like I said, it's very gentle on her. And then you also need some sort of extra container, temporary container, to house the spider while you're changing the substrate, which I actually did before making this video. So that could come in handy too. And for beginners or even experienced tarantula owners, you should have this book, or at least a very reputable tarantula book with plenty of details about care, species, housing, all that stuff. I recommend The Tarantula Keeper's Guide by Stanley A. Schultz and Marguerite J. Schultz. As far as feeding, I personally feed her crickets. You can get them at the bait store or the pet store. I get them at the bait store for cheaper than they sell them at the pet store, like $1 for a dozen, but I'm not sure what they run anywhere else, but that's what I feed her. You can feed them like what's called mealworms or superworms. They're also usually available at pet stores. And I heard about feeder roaches, but I've never really seen or used them. So basically, you'd feed a tarantula that you're wanting to grow quickly, like once a day, as long as it's not refusing food and it's probably full or ready to molt. And otherwise, if you're just wanting your tarantula to do its own thing, feed it once a week or so. As far as molting goes, that's basically where the tarantula, it's growing and it outgrows its shell. It has an exoskeleton like most invertebrates, and once it gets too big for its older shell, it's got to pop out and grow into its new one. Anyways, the symptoms of molting could be refusing food, increased webbing on the ground. It wants to make a web and lay on that web to be secure and comfortable while it's molting. And it'll often become less active. But my Chilean rose hair is not very active to begin with, so she can be dull in the abdomen. It may be hard to tell, from the hairs covering the abdomen, but if they're getting a dull coloration on the abdomen where there's like a bare patch of skin showing, you can kind of see that. And if you find your tarantula laying on its back, it is not dead, most likely. It is getting ready to molt. They lay on their back and they start pushing out with their legs and basically like pulling their old skin off like a glove, like you take off a glove inside out. And basically the skins, I have a few here that I've kept